Coming up on Bridge City News, the Prime Minister makes a push for body cams on all cops. We hear from our police chief on the matter. Plus, a petition to defund Lethbridge's watch program is making waves. And some healthcare workers still not getting paid the extra $2 an hour sent to their employers by the province.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Hello and thanks for joining us. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he will push Canada's premiers to equip police with body-worn cameras. He says the cameras that document police officers' interactions with the public are a relatively simple way to address complaints that police in Canada treat racialized people unfairly. Trudeau says fixing centuries of racial injustice won't happen overnight, but recent protests have shown him that more needs to be done and quickly. Lethbridge Police Service has been looking into body cams like these since 2019 and has goals to begin a pilot program in the fall.
And I think it all comes back down to what we've talked about here a couple times recently is trust, right? Trust for the public, trust for anybody that we're interacting with, trust with the media, right? And that's I would suggest in the front view of a lot of people these days. And it's one step towards building that trust again, back with policing and the communities we serve. I mean, we certainly support it, particularly if federal and provincial governments are going to start wanting to share some of the costs with us, because again, I said some of these costs are going to be not cheap in the long run to have that technology in place. But I think we're also at a place where you have to look at whether we cannot afford to do it too. So I think I'd welcome anything that both provincial and federally are looking at initiatives to help get us there sooner.
People are calling for the Watch, a volunteer program and extension of the police service in Lethbridge, to lose all of its funding. An online petition has been circulating with hundreds of signatures. BCN's Ainsley O'Reilly reports.
The petition, which has more than 2,000 online signatures, states that the volunteer program fails to help the unhoused population, but instead aims to make white people feel less threatened downtown. The Watch manager, Jeff Cove, says that he's actually seen the program save lives and help our city's most vulnerable.
We've stopped and done a wellness check on somebody who's not responsive in the park and found out, in fact, that they're suffering from an opioid crisis. 3 lives were saved by Watch people this month alone. We check on the people that are in the park. Lots of times we find that they need medical attention. Sometimes when they say that we call the police, in our numbers that we had, we called the police since we started, only 19% of the time.
Rebecca Runions, the woman who started the petition, has declined to speak to Bridge City News at this time. Monday afternoon, I was able to speak to a group of homeless Indigenous youth who talk about their experiences with the Watch.
I think it is a racist practice. Like I said before, we're at the convenience stores and they chase us away. But when the Caucasian people, Canadians, they don't get chased away.
The program will be reviewed by City Council in November and has a budget of $1.2 million over 2 years. Cove invites residents to ask questions in order to be fully informed.
I mean, I get how it can look. People see you doing something and then they wonder, why are they doing that? Because people also they tend not to want to ask questions. I wish they'd ask more questions.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Responding to calls to transfer police funding to services such as mental health, Conservative leader Andrew Scheer says the Rcmp and other police forces across the country need to do more to end systemic racism, but taking away their funding won't make Canadians any safer. There have been several recent incidents across Canada involving allegations of racism and brutality by police, including the assault of First Nations chief in Alberta and the fatal police shooting in New Brunswick of a 26-year-old Indigenous woman from BC.
I don't believe that defunding the Rcmp would make Canadians safer. I believe that we have to look at aspects within our police forces and stamp out systemic racism where it exists and put in measures to ensure that nobody is mistreated or treated differently because of the color of their skin or their ethnic background. I point out the fact that Bill Blair, the Minister of Public Safety, was the Chief of Police in Toronto at the time that card checking was instituted. So, I believe that this government is completely hypocritical when it comes to these issues. I believe that we can address these issues within the RCMP and within other police forces, while at the same time protecting the health and security and safety of Canadians.
This sounds like something out of a movie. 2 alert police vehicles were rammed by a drug dealer's car last Wednesday just outside of Medicine Hat. According to a press release, no serious injuries were sustained, but a search of the suspect's car yielded nearly $20,000 worth of drugs, including meth, fentanyl, cocaine, and mushrooms. 4 people were arrested. Inspector Sean Bozer with Alert is quoted in the release as saying, "Drug dealers will go to great lengths to protect their trade, including introducing violence into the community and those around them." End quote. 2 RCMP officers have been charged in the shooting death of a man in northern Alberta. Corporal Randy Stanger and Constable Jessica Brown of the White Court Detachment each face 1 count of criminal negligence causing death. Investigators say Clayton Crawford died from multiple gunshot wounds inside a car after a confrontation in July of 2018. They say officers were looking for a witness or possible victim of a previous shooting when they came upon a man sleeping in a vehicle at a rest stop. The gunshots came from a sidearm and a rifle. 3 days after Toronto's police chief took a knee outside headquarters with protesters calling for reform, Mark Saunders announced he's stepping down. Saunders is the department's first Black chief. He took over the organization in 2015 after 3 decades on the job, including many as a homicide detective. During a news conference, he didn't provide reasons for the timing of his decision, other than wanting to spend more time with his family.
So here I am after 37 plus years of serving what I believe to be the greatest law enforcement agency in the world. I've watched this organization from start to finish grow, learn, listen, and serve the greatest, 4th largest city in the North American continent and the most diverse city in the world. I've also met and made some of the best partnerships and friendships while in office of the chief. Therefore, it is not with a heavy heart that effective July 31st of this year, I will relinquish my seat as Chief of Police of the Toronto Police Service.
It looks like some continuing care employers are shortchanging their healthcare aides out of the $2 pandemic pay boost, according to the union that represents provincial healthcare aides. 6 weeks after the pandemic pay boost for healthcare aides was supposed to start, employees at Chartwell facilities and Rosedale developments have yet to receive a penny. Susan Slade, a vice president for the Alberta Union of Provincial Employees, says it's because these employers are drawing distinctions between the work done for publicly funded beds and privately funded beds.
Which is utterly ridiculous. It's the same patients. Some of them are getting for a full-time permanent, so full-time permanent HCA working, 38 hours a week, they're getting a check for $10 to cover the pandemic pay for 4 weeks of work. Instead of getting $2 an hour on top of their wage, they're getting a $10 check, and absolutely a fraction of what they deserve. They're doing the same work, whether it's a publicly funded bed or a privately funded bed. They are doing the same work, and at the end of the day, these companies are making millions, close to $1 billion.
On Friday, the province said it was going to give $24.5 million to continuing care facilities, including $7.3 million per month for increased healthcare aid staffing levels to top up their wages. Tanning salons have been closed to the public due to COVID-19 for almost 3 months now, and they are set to reopen June 19th as part of the phase 2 of the relaunch strategy. As Micah Quinn explains, one tanning salon in Lethbridge says they've been ready to reopen for a long time, and they're happy to be coming back.
The Alberta government is planning on instituting Phase 2 of the COVID-19 relaunch strategy starting June 19th, and that includes tanning salons. Organic Tan in Lethbridge is excited to finally reopen.
We have been waiting for this day since Phase 1 opened. We are beyond excited because, this is supposed to be our busy season, so we really want to be able to open on June 19th or possibly sooner. We're ready. We have all the things in place, ready to open, so we're just kind of waiting for that call to be made.
Wojci says that spray tan artists had already been using masks before, but now everyone will be wearing one full-time once they reopen. They also added a new disinfecting spray for the tanning rooms.
The one really cool thing that we've actually added, we've actually purchased this new disinfecting spray, which actually gets added to a separate gun that we actually put right onto our spray gun, and then we spray the entire room down, and within 3 minutes, the room is actually disinfected.
Wojci and her partner took over the business in September, and she says it's been tough keeping it running since they have been temporarily closed.
We've been definitely waiting for this season to come because this is generally our busy season. And unfortunately, with all of the cancellations of weddings and grads and everything, we won't see, the income that we thought we were going to see at this time.
Wojci wanted to reopen in Phase 1, but curbside pickup of their products has helped them stay afloat. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The gallery at CASA is calling for submissions for their reopening exhibition called the Summer Salon. The event has been conceived as a way to celebrate the entire arts community and bring together the local creatives who have been thinking, planning, and creating through this long period of isolation. Darcy Logan, curator and gallery services manager with CASA, explains to us what a salon is.
Well, a salon in, say, like the 19th century was a celebration where artists would, from all across communities, would put their work into the gallery for display, but it wouldn't necessarily be laid out in a clean, even manner. Everybody that wanted to participate would be allowed to come in and hang a work. So we're kind of doing that with our summer salon as a celebratory way to reintroduce the building to the community. I'm hoping that they'll come and just see how diverse our arts community is. There's going to be work from people that have just pursue it as a hobby on weekends through to artists that are working really professionally, all in one venue, and you'll really understand the breadth of the arts community in Lethbridge.
Deadline for artist submissions is June 11th. The exhibition will run from July 6th through August 21st. Federal Conservative leader Andrew Scheer says Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's appearance at Friday's massive anti-racism protests in Ottawa sends a conflicting message to Canadians observing COVID-19 restrictions. Scheer says for months, people have been told they can't gather in groups, visit their elderly relatives, or attend funerals to slow the spread of the virus. He says he understands if Canadians are now confused about what advice they ought to be following if Trudeau himself ignores public warnings. Trudeau was wearing a mask as he attended the gathering, one of several held in Canada in recent days in solidarity with the anti-Black racism protests in the U.S. and to object to similar injustices here.
In regards to the rallies, it was important for me to attend. I think to look out the windows of my office and see thousands upon thousands of young people, of Canadians of all ages, stand in solidarity to wanting to see change happen. I felt it was important for me to be part of that, to be able to listen, to be able to hear people, and to be able to understand and to share with people how important it was to act on it. I, as best I could, followed social distancing measures, wearing a mask, keeping distance where possible. But I recognize that it is a difficult situation where we are trying to balance very important competing interests. But for me, it was important that I be there to hear.
Details have been announced today on the slight loosening of the ban on non-essential travel across the Canada-U.S. border to allow some families to reunite. The border has been closed to all but goods and certain categories of essential workers since March in an effort to prevent the spread of COVID-19.
I'm pleased to announce an exemption under the current travel restrictions that will allow the immediate family members of Canadian citizens and permanent residents to enter into Canada. A number of important conditions must be satisfied before this exemption will apply. First, immediate family members will be defined as spouses, common law partners, dependent children and their children, parents, and legal guardians. Second, immediate family members must plan to stay in Canada for at least 15 days. And third, all other public health care protocols, including screens at the border, remain firmly in place.
A preliminary investigation into the April crash of a Canadian military helicopter off the coast of Greece has determined the aircraft did not respond as the crew on board had expected. The report released today by the Royal Canadian Air Force says investigators will now focus on both the Cyclone helicopter's various systems and what role human factors played in the crash. 6 members of the Canadian Armed Forces died when the helicopter went down in the Mediterranean Sea as it returned from a NATO training mission on April 29th. And south of the border, the casket carrying the body of George Floyd arrived at a Houston church where thousands of people paid their respects to the man whose death has sparked global outcry over police brutality. A 6-hour public viewing is being held today with a funeral service and burial to take place tomorrow. Floyd, who was black and handcuffed, died May 25th after a white Minneapolis police officer pressed his knee into his neck for several minutes. Previous memorials were held for Floyd in Minneapolis and Rayford, North Carolina, where he was born. The former Minneapolis police officer responsible for killing Floyd appeared in court for the first time today to face charges, including a second-degree murder. Derek Chauvin will remain in custody on $1 million bond. Chauvin said almost nothing during an 11-minute hearing on video. If you like the sound of thunder, tonight could be your night. We have a severe thunder watch in effect for today and this evening. We'll give you all the details coming up right after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Here's a look at our weather for this Monday night and into tomorrow, Tuesday, for Lethbridge. This evening, we could see increasing clouds and a chance of some showers. There is also a risk of an overnight thunderstorm. Overnight low 7 degrees rather. Into tomorrow, we're going to be waking up to sunshine as the clouds clear. 17 is the high for tomorrow, Tuesday, and then the overnight low 8 degrees. And then as we look further into the week, we are going to see more sunshine coming at us on Wednesday and Thursday, highs of 21 and 24 for those days. 25 is the high on a Friday. Should be a nice day with a mix of sun and cloud. However, there is a chance of some showers beginning Friday night. Saturday should be clear, mix of sun and cloud there, 22 degrees. And then the same thing, 60% chance of showers beginning Saturday evening and into Sunday for 60% chance of rain on a Sunday. 19 degrees is the high. So as we're seeing those temperatures climb a little bit more, we were in the teens last week. We're starting to climb back up into the 20s again. The average for this time of year, 21. The average overnight low, 8 degrees. The high temperature on this day was in 1948. It was 33 degrees. And the chilliest day on record, -1, that was in 1977. The sun rose this morning at 5:25 a.m. and our Monday evening sunset will be at 9:37 p.m. So more than 16 hours of daylight these days as we are getting closer to the summer solstice. Summer, I've been dreaming of summer for so long. Chance of showers tomorrow in Victoria and Vancouver, highs of 16 and 14 degrees in those cities. Sunshine expected tomorrow in Edmonton, high of 19. Calgary's high 17 tomorrow. Also expecting some sunny skies there. A mix of sun and cloud in Saskatoon tomorrow. For Tuesday, 18 degrees is the high. 20 is the high for Regina. Under a mix of sun and clouds. Chance of some clouds there as well in Winnipeg tomorrow with a high of 19 degrees. Now Toronto, look at that weather. 31 degrees under sunny skies. A mix of sun and cloud expected in Ottawa. 26 is their high, 25 for Montreal with a mix of sun and cloud as well. Now some of these places could be getting a slight chance of rain overnight, but then into tomorrow it's drying up with the sun shining. Fredericton's high, 22, sunshine. Chance of rain tomorrow in Charlottetown, 16 is the high. Halifax, 21 is the high. There could be some fog in the morning, which will be dissipating more in the afternoon there. St. John's high, 12 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud. There you go. That is your forecast. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation says the annual pace of housing starts was down 20.4% in May over April, when Quebec is excluded. The housing agency says it released totals without Quebec to assess the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic after construction in the province was shut down in late March. CMHC says it did not conduct its monthly starts and completion survey in Quebec in April, but did so last month after construction resumed in the province on April 20th. When Quebec is included, it says national housing starts were up 16% in May over April. Energy company BP says it's eliminating 14% of its global workforce amid the ongoing impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Chief Executive Bernard Looney says the 10,000 job cuts will be office-based and come mostly this year. The changes are expected to significantly affect senior levels, cutting the number of group leaders by a third. The job cuts come as the pandemic has slashed demand for oil and follows BP's announcement that it wants to eliminate or offset all carbon emissions from its operations by 2050. The founder of CrossFit is apologizing for a Twitter post he made about racial inequality protests after Reebok cut ties with his company. On Saturday, the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation tweeted, "Racism is a public health issue." In reply, CrossFit founder and CEO Greg Glassman tweeted, "It's Floyd-19, a reference to the COVID-19 pandemic that has killed 400,000 people around the world." Reebok had been negotiating a new contract with CrossFit, but now says their partnership will come to an end later this year. Glassman apologized yesterday for his tweet, calling his words not racist, but a mistake. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 120 points to 15,974. The Dow was up 461 points to 27,572. The S&P 500 was up 38 points to 3232. The Nasdaq was up 110 points to 9924. Oil was down $1.39 to 38.16 per barrel. Natural gas was up 3 cents to $1.81. Gold was up 1 cent to $16.98 an ounce. Silver stayed the same at $17.77 an ounce. Wheat is at $245 per metric ton. Barley is at $244. Canola is at $467. Corn is at $232 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 15 cents to 96.33. Feeder cattle were down $1.10 to 133.08. Lean hogs were up 5 cents to 53.98. And the Canadian dollar was down 1/100 of a cent to 74.72 US.
And recapping one of our top stories this hour, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he has spoken with the Commissioner of the RCMP about equipping police with body cameras. He'll propose to the premiers that they do the same with their own police forces when he speaks with them this week. While Trudeau says he understands there are logistical and economic concerns about remote areas and the way that the cameras would work, he says they could be a rapid, substantive solution to allegations of racism and brutality by police. If you're a caregiver, you might want to stick around for this one. Coming up next, we speak with Peter Rosenberger, host of the weekly radio show Hope for the Caregiver, who says in many instances, caregivers have a hard time separating themselves from the one they care for and need to remember to self-care. That is coming up right after the break. Stay with us. Caregivers are an essential part of everyday living for millions of Canadians. It's an intense, high-stress job with many rewarding moments. Today's guest has personal experience in this area, and he's cared for his beautiful wife, Gracie, who lives with severe disabilities for 33 plus years. He is the host of the weekly radio show, Hope for the Caregiver, president of Standing with Hope, and author of the book, Hope for the Caregiver. Peter Rosenberger, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you on today.
It is a treat to be with you all.
So, Peter, tell us, how many people are caregivers in the United States? And I believe you have statistics on Canada as well.
Well, it's a hard number to actually quantify because a lot of times they talk about caregivers for those who are caring for the aging, senior citizens, so forth, and that's about a 42 million number in America. But then you throw in special needs children, then you throw in mentally ill, then you throw in what I do on my show and what I talk about, alcoholics and addicts. That alcoholism and addiction is a chronic impairment. Even if you're in recovery, you're still dealing with that impairment. And anybody's that's in the orbit of that individual, they know that individual is chronically impaired. And that wherever you find somebody who's chronically impaired, you're going to find a caregiver. So most experts in the United States are hovering around that 65 million range for the family caregiver in the United States. And in Canada, it's 8 to 11 million. Again, it's hard to quantify that number because a lot of people don't identify as such. They don't think of themselves as a caregiver. I did a whole bit a couple of years ago with comedian Jeff Foxworthy on "You Might Be a Caregiver If." Wow. And if you've ever hooked up your wife's wheelchair to your dog just to see if it would work, you're probably a caregiver. I mean, that's, I was trying to do something that would kind of make people think of a little bit different about that. And it's okay to laugh at that, by the way. That's funny. And, if you get more than 6 Christmas cards from a doctor, you're probably a caregiver, So people don't think of themselves as such. And I'm helping reframe that conversation so people understand, why is this important? What am I doing here? Where's this going? And how do I do it better or safer?
Yeah. Now, you are a caregiver yourself. Let's talk about how you became one and what has the journey been like for you?
Well, I became one when I said I do, and then I did, because my wife was hurt several years before I even met her. She had a really bad car wreck when she was a teenager, 17 years old. She had the world by the tail. And she was at school, at a music school in Nashville, Tennessee. I was at a different school in South Carolina at the time. Didn't know her. I transferred in as she was recuperating after the wreck. She came back, and friends said, "You got to meet this girl." And they said she's had a really bad wreck, but you guys are going to really hit it off. And she's the most spunky girl. You talked to her yesterday. She's got a personality as big as the state we live in, which is Montana, and beautiful, beautiful young gal. I mean, when I saw her, I was, don't take my word for it, Google her. I was Googling her that day. We didn't even have Google back then. and then I heard her sing, and I was a pianist. She's a singer, and it was all over at that point. And I knew I was going to take care of her. She had a limp. I saw some scars on her lower legs at first, and I knew that she'd had some tough times, but had no concept of what this meant. She'd had about 20 surgeries by the time I met her in the mid-'80s. We got married, and the doctor said, look, if you guys are going to have kids, you have them when you're young. And so I went to her and I said, baby, doctor says we got to do this. And I got a prescription and everything. And I don't know if that's covered under Obamacare, but I bet you that's covered under Clinton care. So we had 2 children, but it accelerated some of that's funny, by the way. Y'all could laugh at that. That is just really funny. And y'all should laugh harder. But we had our sons, and after each son, she gave up one of her legs. It just accelerated the damage that was going on with her crushed limbs. The surgeries just kept mounting. To date that I could count, she's had 80 that I can count, and about another 150 smaller procedures. She's been treated by over 100 doctors in 12 different hospitals, and the bill is now well over 11 million. It just keeps growing. It's really kind of hard to keep track of all of it. I'm ballparking on that one, and that's a low ballpark. So, and she lives with severe pain all the time, and not known a day without it since Reagan was president in his first term. So that's a long time to deal with disability and challenges and heartache and frustration. And I've come to understand where the real battle is for the family caregiver. And it's and this is why I wrote the book. This is why I did the show. This is why I'm here with you today, because I understand how dark and discouraging those places can be when you're having a late night conversation with the ceiling fan, thinking, "Oh Lord, what am I going to do?" Mm-hmm. And so that's my story.
Yeah, it's unbelievable what you two have been through, and I can see that you use humor a lot, which is great. It's a great coping mechanism.
Well, I like to call it humor.
Yeah.
From your reaction, I was unclear if it was humor, but some things don't translate to Canada. I don't know. I don't know what that's all about.
Don't worry about it. Everyone will get it. Okay, so obviously you've got a lot of experience in this. What kind of advice can you give to those who might recognize that they could eventually become a caregiver, possibly to like aging parents? Is there anything that they can do to plan for it?
Yes. First off, if you love somebody, you will probably be a caregiver. If you live long enough, you're probably going to need one. So we all got a stake in this. It's a slow, creeping reality that we don't think about because we're always so busy right here in the here and now. But there's several things you can do to prepare for this. One of them is make sure your home is ready. When you're 50, 60 years old, don't go buy a 3-story home with a whole lot of stairs and the living part is way up on top. Don't do that. That's not a good idea. Make sure that you've got wider doorways, handicap accessible things. You know, we're all one sprained ankle away from being in a tough situation in our own home. So let's go ahead and plan for that. Another thing is we've got to start taking care of ourselves and being good stewards, planning financially, planning physically with our bodies and things such as that, because it is coming. And then if you have a special needs child that comes in and, you know, all of a sudden you've brought this child into the world, there are things to prepare for that once that reality hits of what you can do. And but it all starts with the heart. And my message is for caregivers, healthy caregivers make better caregivers. Mm-hmm. And if you're morbidly obese, how is that going to help you take care of someone else? I see too many people who are really heavy pushing wheelchairs. And I know it. I wrote a book called 7 Caregiver Landmines. Excessive weight gain is one of those. I know. I got so big it took 2 dogs to bark at me. I know. I get it. You know, we reach for the comfort food. That was funny, by the way, too. And it's, you know, I got a million of those. I got so big I broke my family tree. I mean, I got big. And I understand that, but we've got to dial that back in. But the heavy weight that we really carry is not around our waist, it's around our heart. And so what I do is try to speak to that heart of the caregiver to let them know, number one, if you're in this situation right now, which there are millions of people in Canada dealing with this right now, you're in this situation now, hey, you know what? You didn't cause it, you can't cure it.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. That's not yours to fix. You're a steward of this. Now, we don't talk about stewardship a lot in our society. I don't know what you guys do up there in Canada, but in America, we're $24 trillion in debt. Stewardship is clearly not on the top of mind of everybody in America. And we got people burning down our cities and everything else. Stewardship is not where our headspace is. But for caregivers, that's where it has to be. It really has to be for all of us, but I'm just going to focus on caregivers. Mm-hmm. We are stewards of somebody who is suffering or impaired or struggling. We are not owners or fixers. That's the big thing to keep in mind. You can't fix these things. I don't have any power over amputation. My wife's lost both legs, and her body is orthopedically a train wreck. I have no power over that, but I have a lot of power over being a jerk.
Absolutely. That's right.
I got a lot of power over that. And so that's where the battle is for us as caregivers. Can we live peacefully with things that we don't particularly like?
Right. Now, in your book, you use 3 positive words for high stress moments. They are wait, water, and walk. What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, I never have to make amends for something I didn't say. You know, and sometimes we are so quick to blurt out some stuff and we want to jump into it. And for us as caregivers, you know, we're often required to learn to bite our tongue and enjoy the taste of blood, you know, because we want to pop off and say things. Just wait, just breathe, just take a deep breath, 4 seconds in, 8 seconds out, and calm yourself down. If that's not enough, drink some water. A lot of times we reach for sodas or high sugary drinks or whatever. Please, for all that is good in this world, avoid drinking things like Red Bull as a caregiver. It is not good for you. And we don't need to be so amped up. Our life is like this anyway. So drink some water, drink to think. We need to hydrate, and water gives us a chance to get our blood pressure down. Also, it fills our mouth with something besides words. We don't always have to go to every fight we get a ticket to. They're going to say things that or family members are going to say things, or doctors or nurses, or somebody's going to say, pastors, church people come up to you. Well, if you had enough faith, you wouldn't be going through this. Well, they don't say that to me anymore. I'm a 2nd-degree black belt, so I usually know how to deal with that kind of nonsense. And I'm helping help people get better theology in this too, because we got really terrible theology when it comes to suffering. But drink, okay? Just drinks, not, I mean, let me clarify, drink water. just clarify that.
Don't drink red wine, is what you're saying.
And the last thing is go for a walk if you need to. Weight, water, walk. You don't have to engage on all these things. It's okay to let some of this go.
That's interesting. It's good advice, too. Now, in your book, you also mentioned that there are 6 major impact areas affected by caregiving. What are they?
Well, you got your health, your emotions, your lifestyle, your profession, your money, and your endurance. You put it all together, it says, help me. And that's the cry for us as caregivers. All of these things are affected, but it starts with your heart. If your head and heart are squirrely, guess what? Your wallet will soon follow. If you are a train wreck in your darkest places in your heart, guess what? Your body will soon be that way too. It's just, and so if you can detangle this stuff in the heart, then we give every part of our living existence a fighting chance in dealing with these realities. So that's where I focus, but it's always about help me, not help us, not help her, help me. Because if I'm in a good place, my wife, who has all these things going on with her, has a fair shot at having some things help with her. But if I'm in a bad place, what's going to happen to her?
Yeah, it's almost like the caregiver needs a caregiver sometimes, right? It sounds like such a hard job.
I don't give a lot of instruction to my fellow caregivers on the air or anywhere else. What I try to give is reminders, because I think that's where our battle is. You can't tell me how to take care of my wife. I can't tell you how to take care of your family member, but we can remind each other of where safety is. In the Army, sometimes the leader is the guy that remembers where the Jeep is parked, you know? And we can remind each other of where safety is. Have you seen your doctor lately? Have you been to a counselor lately? When's the last time that you went for a walk?
Right. And that's good advice for the caregivers. You also mentioned that there are 3 I's that every caregiver suffers from. What are they?
Every one of us lose their independence, we become isolated, and then we lose our identity. And that loss of identity is such a debilitating thing for family caregivers. Ask a caregiver, how are you doing? They say, well, she had a bad night, or I'm not doing, she had a bad night, or he's had a bad night, or we're not doing so well. They struggle with saying I. And so what I do on my show, when I have a caller that calls, it's a live show, and I always ask, how are you feeling? And it's amazing how many times they have to start and reposition again to be able to go back and say, I'm tired, I'm scared, I'm just hacked off. I don't know what to do. I don't care what comes after the word I. We can have a real conversation at that point, because then they start speaking, and they're probably stuttering, and tears will fill up their eyes. I've seen this over and over and over when they start speaking from their heart. But I try to give them enough space to be able to do that so that they can express what's going on there, get it all on the table. Now let's have a real conversation.
Oh, that's so interesting. And you're absolutely right. You do lose your identity, and you start to take on, almost project your personality onto the other person, or they get projected back onto you. That is so interesting. And it really drives home the fact of how much caregivers need other people in their lives too, right? Like counseling, and I would imagine they suffer from guilt a lot of times, and worry, and just all kinds of stresses.
Guilt really, really cripples caregivers.
Yeah.
I call it part of the fog of caregivers: fear, obligation, and guilt. And we get lost in the fog.
Yeah.
Parents feel guilty for bringing a child into this world with special needs. You feel guilty if your loved one can't get up and go and just stand up and take a shower. You feel guilty if you can get up and go and walk around the block and they can't. There are a lot of things to feel, not just sins that get great press. There are a lot of things to feel guilty about. You feel guilty if you just want to sit down and watch a television show uninterrupted for an hour.
Wow.
I try to help caregivers work through that a little bit and start using the word grace. I love that word grace. It's my favorite word in the English language. I married a woman named Grace, and I love the word grace. And we've got to learn how to apply that in our own lives so that we can live peacefully with very, very painful things.
Well, Peter Rosenberger, we are out of time, unfortunately. I would love to go on talking to you for hours and hours, and I'm sure you have so much to say on this topic. Thank you so much for joining us today, though.
Thank y'all for having me. I mean, I hope my southern accent translates over to the north. But thank you. You'll probably use subtitles, but thanks for having me.
Not at all. Thank you so much. That was Peter Rosenberger, president of Standing with Hope and the author of the book, Hope for the Caregiver. The coronavirus pandemic has had a major impact on all of us, but one segment of the society has likely been impacted more than most, and that is, of course, the homeless population and the working poor. Our guest today is Ken Kissick, co-founder of Streets Alive Mission here in Lethbridge. Ken, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so Ken, I would imagine that this has to be an extra tough time for people on the streets. I'm guessing many have pre-existing medical conditions and limited access to medical care and whatnot.
It's kind of a two-edged sword, because yes, they're a more vulnerable population. But the other side to that is, for them, coronavirus is not something that they're worried about, because Hep C, HIV, liver, kidney, there's a lot of other things that will affect them more greatly than the possibility of coronavirus.
That makes sense.
But it does limit the services now that they can access. So there's a myriad of things that make it difficult for us to manage some of the population, the addicted population, that wants to stop, trying to get them on supports, trying to get them to treatment or detox centers. All of that is really difficult.
I would imagine, and now, of course, we're all doing the social distancing thing, right? How is this population handling that? Are they doing it, or are they not so much?
Well, the street population is a family unto itself. They have one another's backs. And so to try and get them to self-distance is a really keen problem, because while they understand what's trying to go on, they just feel like family. Now, we're not self-distancing as families because we're in a group, right? And so are they. And so we try and get them to, do that stuff. When they come into Streets Alive, we've set up so that, while they're waiting, they're 6 feet apart. They have to come in. There's a hand washing station. And they're pretty good at following those instructions. But then they'll go back outside and all stand together, a group on the street. So.
Yeah, exactly. But the education component is there. You're teaching them. And
they're for the most part, they're being compliant. If the police or the watch or somebody asks them to they do spread out, and then they'll come back together.
That's how it is, right?
That's how it is.
That's how they live their lives. Yeah. Okay, so now with the pandemic, the thrift stores have shut down, of course, but the need is still there. And I understand that you're still doing what needs to be done, and that you're still accepting donations in a temporary warehouse. Is that right?
What happened was, we were invited by the city as part of their COVID response group to lead what they call the clothing, hygiene, and supplies pod. And in conversation with the Salvation Army, MCC, the Mission Thrift Store, and the city itself, we realized people are at home cleaning out their closets, accumulating stuff, and there was a concern if we left this till after COVID, there would be this mass onslaught. So what we did is Bible for Missions Foundation gave us the old Mission Thrift Store building to use for free. And what we've done is we've set up a warehouse in there for people to bring all kinds of items that they would normally take to the thrift stores. Clothing, household goods, furniture. The only thing we're not taking is beds. And what we're doing is we're pulling out of it the stuff that we need and the agencies need, and the agencies like the Rapid Rehousing Group, the COPE team, the different teams that are out there can come in and get supplies from the warehouse, okay? We're still operating our pin bank at the Mission, and we feed it out of the warehouse. Then when this is all done, the agencies, My City Care and that group will come back in, take everything that we've really sorted and boxed and everything else, and it'll be done. And they'll be able to kind of take it as they can feed it through their volunteer system.
And where specifically can people take us?
So that is located at 110th Street. It is right across from the Forfeit place, right?
Okay,
The old
yep,
London
yep.
Drugs.
Yep, Fit for
Okay,
Less, yep, right
Fit
there.
for Us,
Yep,
it's right
yep,
there.
yep.
You can't miss it. It's the west door.
Yeah.
We're open from 9:30 till noon and 1 to 4:30, Monday to Friday. So bring your stuff down.
Okay, no, that's great. Are there any specific donations that you're in need of?
Well, we're always in need of jeans, hoodies, underwear, okay, and feminine protection in terms of the hygiene, okay? I mean, we don't want to become a place that collects your garbage, but, you know, all your stuff that you would normally take into the thrift stores, bring it on down. We're collecting it, and it'll get redistributed.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
It's wonderful. And one of the things about it is, initially our you know, we're trying to manage it, but it's really picking up steam. With the success comes a few problems. We've had to reach out to get some garbage containers in collection because some stuff does need to go. Everything is self-distanced. The stuff that comes in today will be held for 2 more days, and then we put it in. So we're following all the practices that we need to follow in terms of the COVID response.
Okay, that's fantastic. That's excellent. Now, this kind of leads into my next question. How has COVID-19 changed the way that your outreach team is doing its work?
Well, now the outreach team, we've had to up the game because we're trying to fill gaps. One of the teams was the diversion outreach team, which had been asked to do medical transport. So they can no longer touch an individual. The individual has to be able to get in and out of their vehicle. So for those that kind of get intoxicated and often need help, there's no transport for them to intox. So our outreach team is filling that gap for them. We've had to expand our hours from 9 to 9, Monday to Friday. We're on call 9 to 9 on Saturdays for that. Plus, we're out there as an extra set of eyes, the encampments and those kinds of places. And the outreach team is another one that the city has asked us to lead. So we're working with Watch, the Lethbridge Police Service, the Arches Cope, the DOT team, Quest, and some of those to help them make sure that the street population is staying healthy, and if we see somebody that isn't, try and get them in and get them tested.
Okay, so what does the outreach team normally do then? Because you mentioned sometimes there's physical contact and they can't do that now. So normally,
our outreach team has always been able to do that.
Okay.
It's the diversion outreach team that couldn't. So we're filling that gap, right?
Okay.
So the other thing that because we've moved to bagged lunches for our evening feeding program, we're also providing, we have a supply of bagged lunches, water, those kinds of things. The team is mobile, going around just checking on people.
So, I mean, obviously that gets back to the basics of what you guys do. You're helping to food, clothe, shelter, and encourage these people on the street and helping them beat addictions as well, because that still needs to be done, right?
That's right.
Okay.
The struggle we're having actually in the addicted population right now is because of the border closure, there's less opioids, which is good on one hand, but the meth use has gone up, and it's actually homemade, self-cooked. So there's bad batches, and so we're really struggling with that population because they're getting quite meth is speed, and so they're very agitated. They're very we're struggling to maintain help for them, okay? And so that's a bit of a struggle. But the other is, it's become dangerous, and so some of them want to get off the street. And what that's resulted in is because, first of all, detox and treatment were completely shut down, and now they're opened up, but it's a lot of factors in there. Our transitional housing program, we're actually bringing some of them straight in off the street and doing detox and treatment, which we're not totally set up for, but for somebody that wants to get out, we want to get them out.
It sounds like a challenge.
It's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, but there must be some success stories as well, people who are wanting to get off of the addiction or have already. Can you share any success stories?
Yeah, there's lots of success stories. Right now, we have We have 15 men in our recovery program, okay? We have 11 of those 15 men are part of the warehouse. So they've kind of stopped their programming to help us in the warehouse. And they're loving it. They're stepping up to the plate. We're trying to get them in, but we've had a number of guys hit 60 and 90 days in this. Our women's program, we have 2 girls that we actually took in straight off the street, and they're just coming up on 30 days clean. So wow. It's working. They're motivated, and we are seeing that, and we are working with others to try and get the people into the treatment that when we can. But transportation is an issue. Mm-hmm. There's lots of hurdles we're trying to overcome, and it's tough on that population.
Oh, it sounds like it. Are there more people using your food program now, or is it about the same as it was before?
The food program, it is a little different for us right now in that Alpha House out of Calgary was working on the Intox, the 30-bed Intox facility. But when COVID struck, they actually took over the shelter as well, and they're running 2 different sites. We call them Alpha 1 and Alpha 2. The Alpha 2 is in Fritzick. But we've been providing food for them, bagged lunches, for the clientele that's in there, because when they're in the Intox facility, if they leave, they have to stay out for an hour, and then they might lose their place. So this is just a way for us to get evening food into them. We're providing probably 80 bag lunches a day to them. And then there's another 40 bag lunches that we have out on the street.
Okay.
So the number of bagged lunches we're feeding is up, okay, or evening meals. But we've had great response in that. The Soup Kitchen's about to start a new evening meal program. And so we'll have to just monitor that because we don't want to duplicate. But it's given us a better opportunity to reach out. We went to bag lunches to help with self-distancing and group gathering.
And you go out and distribute them?
We go out and distribute them, absolutely.
That's amazing. That's a great
way to get into them. It also allows us to put eyes on them in an environment that's theirs. The street is theirs, right? So they're much more open to talk with us and do those kinds of things.
That's awesome. Now, how are you doing for volunteers? Are your numbers reducing there? Or?
Well, so volunteers is a bit erratic. And as you can understand, some people want to choose to stay and self-isolate. The seniors, which form a large portion of the volunteers for all of these groups, they need to be kept safe. And so there's a change in that. But then we've had others step up. Yesterday we did an orientation for 10 volunteers that want to come and help at the warehouse where we have a need. Some of our volunteers, they're just steady. We have a couple that for the last 9 years drives in from Hayes every Friday, and they just keep coming. Now, Harvey's in the field, so it's just Kathy, but they're committed. We have some seniors who have made sandwiches for like 10 years, and they just come in and do their thing. So it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah. So let's talk about now with the needs actually increasing because of coronavirus, you've actually set up an emergency response fund, right? So how can viewers get involved in supporting your work with this?
So the first thing anybody can do is pray for us. Pray for the people. Pray for the community. Pray that, God's will would be done. It's the one thing you can do. Pray for our protection and protection of the people. That's the one thing you can do. If you have time and want to volunteer, go online, www.streets live, and just fill out an application and come in. And the other is if you go to the same website and you want to just donate, click on donate. You can go in and choose the response fund and the emergency response fund, and you can help us out with some cash donation.
That's awesome. So any final thoughts before we leave each other? Our church is answering the call to help you guys in this time of crisis.
We're getting a great response from the community. The churches are facing their own challenge, but the Christian community itself, I think, is rising up. But we have to keep our eye on the fact that there's 3 stages to this. So right now we're in stage 1, the crisis itself. It's the pit. okay? But then there's going to be recovery from this crisis, which is how we climb out of the pit. And that's going to have another set of challenges and another set of financial needs and resource needs. And then when we get out of that, there's going to be stage 3, which is the new normal. We are not going back to where it was pre-COVID. There are going to be differences economically, as much as the governments are trying, there are going to be failed businesses, there's going to be a need, and so we believe there's going to be an increased need for our kinds of services, and we need to be in a position to manage them. I'd just like to, I've been reminding people, Acts 17:26, Paul is talking to the Romans about the unknown God, but he talks, and he's using the word nations. But really what he's saying was that God knew that we would be alive at this time, so he created us for such a time as this. And he will equip us to be his light, his salt in this darkness at this time as we work through this virus. So we're looking at Streets Alive, we're looking at this as a wave to ride. We're declaring that we're not going to just survive this, we're going to thrive in the midst of it, and we're going to flourish on the other side of it. We serve the living God, and he created us for this, so we're full speed ahead. We're looking to the future, we want to be prepared, and we're looking for anybody that will join us and be ready to carry us through stage 1, 2, and 3, and when we're out the other side. I mean, the greatest thing that we do right now is we still bring hope to those that have none. We still bring the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ every day. And there's more and more people need to hear that message. And while in the midst of the warehouse and everything else we're doing, everything we do brings that message. So thank you for allowing me to come and share.
Well,
today.
Ken, thank you so much for joining us today. It was very enlightening. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Great. Thank you again.
That was Ken Kissick, the co-founder of Streets Alive mission in Lethbridge. On behalf of all of us here at BCN, thank you for watching.